Hi, friends. It's time to continue our story about Abram and Sarai. Who remembers the names that God gave them? Right, He gave them a new name. Abram is now Abraham, and Sarai is now Sarah. Very good. So let's turn to our Bibles. We're at the end of Genesis 17. When we left off, God gave Abraham and Sarah new names, but he also did something else. So I'm going to go to verse 16, and he's talking about Sarah, and he says, I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And Abraham said to God, If only Ishmael might live under your blessing. So God is telling Abraham he's going to have a son, but Abraham is 99 years old, and he's laughing. Now, in a few days, it's going to be April Fool's. Now, we don't know when this is, but this sounds like a joke to Abraham. That's why he's laughing so much. But now we're going to skip ahead to chapter 18. And this is what's going to happen. So again, Abram or Abraham, Sarai or Sarah have to trust in God, because God can make the impossible possible. Right. Okay. So verse 1, chapter 18, it says, The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. Now, that tells us that even though these men didn't tell Abraham who they were, Abraham knew who they were. He knew that they must have been sent from God, because if you live in a desert, there's not very many people who are going to be coming to visit you, okay? So for 3 strangers to be coming to their house and to their tent during the heat of the day, Abraham knows what we might not know, because 1, he trusts in God so much, but 2, it's because he knows we don't know what it's like to live in the desert. So he knows that's a little weird for some people to be visiting. So this is what Abraham says next, and this is how we know that Abraham knows. Okay? He says, If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant. Very well, they answered, do as you say. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 seahs of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread. Then he ran into the herd and selected a choice, tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. So that might not sound very yummy to us, but in Abraham's time, ooh, mwah, that was delicioso. So Abraham made them the best dinner that he could possibly make. And he has Sarah help him. Sarah, can you make some bread? I'll do this part, you do this part. We'll work together, just like we do. We have to work on teamwork, right? Remember? So they did some teamwork to make the best dinner for these 3 visitors. And Abraham knew they had sent from God. And then what happens next is one of them says, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" Now, it doesn't say it in here, but something special about that question is that they never introduced themselves, and Abraham never introduced himself to them. So, how in the world did they know that Abraham had a wife, first of all, and second of all, that her name was Sarah? Right, only by God. Exactly. And this is what happens when you have that strong trust and faith in God. So let's keep listening. "There in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Now, Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But we know God sees everything. And he said, "Oh, but yes, you did." Now, the interesting thing about God is that God gave Abraham and Sarah the name for their child, which is Isaac. And Isaac means he who laughs. So even in this time of question and really, really strong faith, having to push through that questioning, God was able to give them a name that they could appreciate because it didn't make sense, right? They're so old. Can you imagine your grandparents? Remember, your grandparents had your mommy and your daddy, but they wouldn't have a child like the same age as you, right? That sounds so silly. And that's why Abraham and Sarah were laughing so much, because they couldn't believe this. So, just as God said, is anything impossible for God? No. So we have to trust, even when it's really hard and even when it really sounds so silly, we have to trust in him. Okay? All right, I love you. Air hugs. Ooh, I feel it. And I'll see you later.